Recording in progress.
This is episode 161, season 4, episode 1 of Coaching with the Bible. No big intros, no funny starts. This has been one brutal week here in Israel. And so it does require sort of a different focus and a different mind, and I wondered even if I should share anything at all this week, and I didn't know where to start or what to think about, and it's been brutal. But at the outset, I want to thank all of you, friends, family, colleagues, who reached out over the last week with emails, text messages, WhatsApp messages, voice notes, directly to me through different social platforms. Appreciate every single one of you and every single message. Some of you reached out to me before I even really knew about what had gone on here in Israel just 6 days ago, and were concerned. Some of you I hardly know, that's the truth, but still you felt compelled to reach out, to check in, to see how I'm doing, how my family's doing, how my friends are doing, and to just show your solidarity, just show your friendship, just show that you're thinking of us and thinking about us, and in many cases, thankfully, praying for us as well. And I appreciate it. And that gratitude probably should be enough here for today. But the truth is, I'm not okay. I don't think anyone here is okay. It's scary. It's dangerous. It's precarious. It's something we've never experienced before. It's horrible. It's shocking. It's horrific. And we're living through it. And it feels like the holiday that ended last Saturday was a million years ago, and yet it was only 6 days ago. And how much the world has changed for sure, and how much it's going to change for sure in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. Nothing will be the same after last Saturday. Nothing. Not in Israel, not in the Middle East, not in the world. The outpouring of solidarity, the outpouring of support and unity, countries, individuals, from whoever you take, the most important and most powerful people in the world, to influencers in the social realm, to sports teams and athletes, to just the everyday person who's standing in solidarity and unity and support of the people of Israel and the Jewish people this week, is unbelievable. I think in some regard unfathomable. And it's meaningful and it's appreciated. Some of the language and the speeches that President Biden has shared this week have been second to none, perhaps, in the history of the world, of a leader standing with us like that. But admittedly, it doesn't fill the void of all the people who were killed and all the people who have died over the last 6 days simply for just being part of the Jewish people, simply for being here in Israel, simply for being the enemy of Hamas. And suffered unspeakable atrocities, crime, violation, tragedy, horrific, by the looks of the pictures, the video, and the eyewitness testimony around it that was shared this week. Simply, again, for being a Jew. Maybe for some of us, we thought that that was over, and that we had gotten through it, and we were past it, and that, some of the things that had gone on over the last years are sort of like just a little annoyance, and we should just be bigger, and we'll get through it, and we'll get past it, and just and not think about it again. And then the unspeakable nature of what took place 6 days ago, and the joy which the enemy took in executing it I'll use that term. And their supporters showed, wherever they may be, is not shocking per se. I don't think we're shocked that there are supporters of Hamas in a lot of places. Anti-Semitism is rife in many places and growing in many places as well. But perhaps the brazenness and the public nature of that joy and celebration of it at maybe perhaps an unprecedented level than we've seen before. Or perhaps the level of depravity that the members of Hamas took in perpetrating what they perpetrated over those hours and that day. The pleasure they took in posting it to social media, the pleasure they took in sharing it with the family members directly. Sickening. Are we surprised? I'm not sure we're surprised. Are we perhaps at a loss for words? I think many of us are. There is a shock level to it. There's a darkness, heavy, heavy darkness that comes with it. Simply for being Jewish and simply for living in the Middle East, living in the state of Israel, practicing your faith, or simply practicing being a living human being, enjoying freedom, and in the case of many, reveling in music and dance, or celebrating a holiday, or just enjoying an average Shabbat, an average Saturday at this time of the year here. And so I really thought not to share more than just sort of my feelings on it from that perspective, but I realized that that is not enough, because that's simply just the side of this, which is the dark side of it. And you've heard probably many people over the course of the week talk about darkness versus light, because, amazing on the timing that as we begin the cycle of the reading of the Torah once again with the portion known as Genesis and the creation story at the beginning of the book of Genesis, when God separates light from dark. So a lot of people talk about light from dark. Experienced some of it this week, to be honest. The outpouring of support and affection and appreciation from friends is light in a sea of darkness around us here. Beyond that, I spent all day Wednesday this week traveling throughout the South with someone by the name of Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon. He's a very well-known rabbinic figure here in Israel, and around the world for that matter, as a genuine scholar, an exceptionally righteous person, and what I saw on Wednesday, an exceptionally powerful leader. The level of empathy and compassion and passion and concern and care for each and every soldier that we visited. It was hundreds. The time he spent with little children who have been displaced because their community was attacked last Saturday, sitting on the floor with them, singing, dancing with them, sharing some treats with them to give them a little bit of joy in this very, very difficult, dark time for them. Giving strength to people with his words over and over and over and over again throughout the day in every single place. Sort of a reservoir that knew no end of that level of strength. The appreciation level on the side of the soldiers and the people of that community, and the person who we met who had been wounded, who had fought face to face with terrorists last Saturday, and his sense of appreciation of us just simply showing up and being there, thanking us at the same time that we thanked him. It was inspiring. Driving throughout the South, every place you drove where you saw just, almost miles and miles of parked cars, you might have thought that you had been at a stadium somewhere and there was no parking left. It wasn't a stadium. It was army bases. There simply wasn't enough room in the parking lots in and around the army bases to handle the amount of people who showed up for reserve duty when called, or showed up without being called and volunteered and show up. And so as we drove past, some of the people in the car with me had thought, why are there so many cars here? What's the traffic jam? And it wasn't traffic jam because people were sitting in their cars driving. It was because simply the cars were on the side of the road and they were parked for miles outside of the Army bases because everybody wants to show up. But the amount of gear, the amount of supplies, the amount of food, and the number of letters that were shared with the soldiers as we drove and met with them and talked to them, the outpouring of goodness was inspiring. I'm trying to get to a space where I can allow that goodness and that sense of inspiration to outweigh and overwhelm the darkness. I can't say that I'm there just yet. But as I think about it more, the outpouring yesterday as I made an effort here locally in our community to raise some funds for a particularly important local project, and how quickly everyone I asked responded and responded in spades, it's heartwarming. Nobody said no on that request. Some even said, you didn't ask me for enough, I'm going to give more. Or in the efforts in helping other people raise money for all kinds of supplies, or simply just to make connections so that people can provide volunteer services, whether they're medical or emotional, psychological, spiritual, or simply physical. It has awakened this sleeping giant of community and unity that seemed for many months this year to be on the edge of collapse. And so for what felt like an entire year where the community was falling apart here and ripping itself apart here, none of that stuff seems to matter anymore. It's always unfortunate that it takes the brazen, horrific acts of an enemy to bring that about. But it does. And so no longer do right and left matter. No longer does religious and secular really matter. What matters most is our people. What matters most is giving our people the chance to live, to breathe, and to exercise the freedoms that they want to bring into the world and the experiences that they want to have with their spouses and children and extended families and friends and communities. Priority. And as we prepare to go into a Sabbath like no other we've all experienced in our lives, myself included there, we've been through little smaller events, let's call them, or skirmishes with the enemy over the number of years that we've lived here. And in our lifetime, some wider ones, certainly. This seems a little different. Figuring out how to leave the television on or the computer on or our phone on so that we can be aware of things as they happen because we need to know about them. That's different. Making sure that the safe room is A, secured, and B, has supplies in it, and C, that the lights or the air conditioner are on so that in the event that we need to be here for an extended period of time for whatever reason over the next day, that we can be. And the notion that in the South, and also a little bit of a flare-up in the North, flare-up is an understatement, that our young men and women will be fighting for all of our lives over the course of that period of time is just plain crazy. 19, 20, 21-year-old, 25-year-old, 30-year-old, in the prime of their life should be doing things way more interesting and exciting and enjoyable than fighting a war. Going into towns and communities potentially and fighting an enemy that has no moral bounds, that has every interest in killing every single one of them and okay with the death of their own people, lacking any sense of moral clarity, morality, humanity. That's sort of what's swimming through the head as we get through this. And so if there's anything biblical about this, for me this week, is simply this. The portion known as Genesis, the first chapter, the creation story, God is separating between all kinds of things. He's separating between light and dark, separating between day and night. He's putting the sun and the moon and the stars into the skies to separate between the days, the weeks, the months, the seasons of the year. It's very much about creating boundaries, separation, clarity where there is mostly ambiguity. The Bible seems very intent on establishing boundaries, drawing lines for everything. The physical world, spiritual world, religious world, psychological world. Everything has lines. And too often in our own lives, in our own world, especially now you see it, people lack the ability to stay within the lines. Or they prefer to blur the lines whenever they can because of a fear of having courage and establishing with clarity what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. And while I don't feel like I needed any sort of a re-education on the subject of what's good versus what's evil, what's moral, what's immoral, some of the world seems to have that problem. An inability to have moral clarity leads to an inability to have moral consistency, and then ultimately an inability to have moral courage. When a moment presents itself where people need to stand up and speak clearly for what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil, what should be okay and what shouldn't be okay, what kind of behaviors and actions that are taken are acceptable or not acceptable. And obviously the things that Hamas has done this week, clearly not acceptable, but there's a portion of the world that struggles to find the clear line between right and wrong, between moral and immoral, and therefore has an inability to state in plain language what is happening, and thereby justifying it on some level, or if not directly justifying it, but giving it the space to breathe and to live and to have room to keep going. Perhaps it's out of a fear of if I define it and if I make it clear, then I have to then deal with it. Perhaps it's out of a fear that if I then do that, I'm choosing sides. Yes, choosing sides. Because when the Bible establishes that sense of boundary, you have to choose a side. It can't be day when it's night. It can't be night when it's day. It's not winter when it's summer. It's not summer when it's winter. It's not humane when it's inhumane. It's not moral when it's immoral. There are lines. It's not holy when it's profane, and it's not profane when it's holy. We separate those things. Because we should, because we must, because the Bible teaches it to us, because we're religious people. But beyond that, if we want to continue to develop and evolve as a moral and just society, a space where freedom of ideas and freedom of action is central and core for every single one of us on this planet, then it does require us at times to draw lines, to make distinctions, and then to state clearly and identify specifically what the behavior is that is okay and is not okay, what is wrong, what is not okay. When it's moral and when it's immoral, when it's abhorrent, when it's disgusting, when it's despicable, when it's a crime of humanity, and when it it needs to perhaps be eradicated from the world. That's where we're at. It's like a lot to process and a lot to think about. Moral clarity is super important for all of us every day of the week and every month of the year, all the time. Moral courage also, because moral courage is super hard. But that's when you lead. It's easy when it's not important. It's easy when it's not on the table. It's easy when it's not in front of you and has to be dealt with. But when it is, and you're not there because you don't have the clarity or the courage or the consistency of your moral values and your ethical platforms to establish what is right and what is wrong, then we have a problem because you have a problem. And people suffer because you can't make up your mind. You can't decide. You can't find the words to differentiate between what is and what isn't. And now is a moment where we really need that. Rare is the moment when you get this sort of sense of unity around an issue from the free world, rallying around Israel and the Jewish people in an unprecedented manner. And so it's for us to think about, to give pause to. While we're praying, while we're meditating, while we're thinking, while those of us in the free world outside of Israel are going to enjoy another weekend. Maybe a chance to breathe on a Saturday or on a Sunday and not be in a war zone. And not have that sense of the enemy that close by. Where is your moral compass? What are the things that you have moral clarity about? What are the things that, when necessary, you would stand up and show some moral courage and some backbone and some spine? And what are the ones that aren't there yet? And what's the reason that that's the case? I'm not going to ask you why. I could. But I'll ask you, what's the reason? What are the reasons? What's holding you back from straightening that spine and being clear, congruent in your thinking and in your actions and your emotions and your mental state and your core value set? Because the reality of it is that we need it. And the reality of it is that we need to hear it. The reality of it is we need to see it. And the reality of it is those who are on the other side of that, who think being ambiguous or completely flipped with respect to moral and immoral, also need to hear it. At best, they're misguided and miseducated. At worst, they're sitting not too far from here, hoping to have the opportunity to kill more Jews over the course of the coming days, weeks, and months. Moral clarity. So as much as that in the course of 160 weeks of coaching with the Bible, we have looked to set and establish sort of protocols and structures where we can improve our lives and become better human beings in the better condition of the day and the weeks and how we live I'm getting ahead of myself, how we live, toss that out for this week and simply focus on this fundamental question in your life. What am I clear about? What do I have moral clarity about? What do I not have moral clarity about? Where's the ambiguity? Can I have that conversation with someone around me right now on the specifics so that I can get to clarity and then get to courage? Because sure as anything, the world needs it right now. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. I look forward to seeing you in better weeks and better times and better moments. Pray for all of us. Pray for yourselves. Pray for humanity. And let's hope we come out of this on the other side with a much freer, much better world.